Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, fending for themselves. COVID numbers are moving in the right direction, but a new study looks at its heartbreaking impact on children. More than 140,000 kids have been orphaned in the past year and a half. More have lost their caregivers. Our report on this tragic consequence of the pandemic, and the children of color have been affected in greater numbers. Do we have a deal? Senate Democrats are weighing a Republican offer to avoid having the country veer off a fiscal cliff. 11 days until the debt ceiling deadline, will Democratic leaders accept a short-term fix? Glacial displace. The Swiss Alps are melting at a record pace, but it's not all doom and gloom. There may be some hope for the region. We'll show you how scientists are using new innovations like UV blankets to protect one of the most famous landscapes in the world. And costume conundrum. Halloween is scary, but not being able to celebrate, well, that's scarier. A warning from one of the biggest Halloween retailers in the country about potential supply chain shortages this season, when you should order your wigs and fangs.
I've been a vampire a few times.
So, or maybe make your own fangs. Might be what you have to do this year. We'll find out in a little bit.
Yes.
We do want to begin with a new hope in the battle against the coronavirus. COVID cases and hospitalizations are down in dozens of states that were once some of the nation's most serious hotspots.
Yeah, but experts warn we are not out of the woods yet, with winter and flu season right around the corner. The White House is taking precautions against another surge. They announced a new $1 billion investment to help ramp up the number of rapid tests available before the holidays. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk joins us now from outside Sydenham Hospital in New York with the latest. Stephanie, good morning.
Hey, Savannah and Joe, good morning to you guys. All the numbers we care about, cases, hospitalizations, deaths, they are down, and they've been actually going down for weeks now, and that is especially good news for those states in the South that were hardest hit by this surge. But a lot of people are wondering, are we out of the woods? Could there be a surge? The winter's coming, and health officials are striking a cautiously optimistic tone. The worst, they say, may just be behind us. The deadly summer surge has run out of steam. Nationwide, COVID cases are down nearly 40% since September 1st. In the hard-hit South, the declines are even more dramatic. In Arkansas, cases are down 65%.
It does feel better. It does feel much better as far as there's a lot more hope.
In Louisiana, cases dropped 71%. Florida, 77%. In Missouri, the numbers are down too, but health workers at Cox Health aren't ready to celebrate. Not just yet.
I worry that there's more coming. Every day, it's just, is this the last of it? I hope so. Am I confident that that's correct? No.
But between vaccinations and high numbers of infections, the peaks in this roller coaster of a pandemic may be flattening out.
Is it reasonable to expect that we will reach a point with this virus where it feels less like a deadly pandemic and more like the flu?
I do think so. I think that as we use vaccines, what we're effectively doing is taming the virus. We're taking off the table its abilities to put people in the hospital and kill us.
One concern experts have is the affordability and accessibility of testing. The White House announcing an initiative to dramatically boost testing supply before the end of the year.
We'll have available supply of 200 million rapid at-home tests per month starting in December.
The message from the White House: get tested, get vaccinated, and get the flu shot.
Getting vaccinated against flu and against COVID-19 is the best way that everyone can stay healthy, protecting themselves, their loved ones, and their communities.
The White House issued a new report showing how these mandates in the workplace have actually driven the numbers down as well. Also, people are out there getting boosters, and in the coming weeks, you're going to have 5 to 11-year-olds likely become eligible. That's roughly 30 million people for the vaccine. That, too, will drive those numbers down. All good news for the winter months, guys.
All right, that's great to hear. Stephanie Gosk, thank you so much.
Well, most states are seeing a decline in COVID cases. Idaho is continuing to ration care among hospital patients as state leaders battle over vaccine and mask mandates. The disagreements between Lieutenant Governor Janice McKeon and Governor Brad Little came to a head this week. The lieutenant governor signed an executive order banning most mandates, a move she made when the governor left the state. Left doctors confused and frustrated as hospitals there remain at near full capacity. According to the Idaho Division of Public Health, only 16 ICU beds are available statewide. Many more hospitals remain at full capacity. Idaho also has one of the lowest vaccine rates in the country, with just 42% of the population there fully vaccinated. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now from Primary Health Pediatric Clinic in Meridian, Idaho, with more. So, Maura, first, give us a timeline of this back and forth between the governor and lieutenant governor. How did this unfold? And it's not the first time, right?
No, it's not. This has happened before when the governor has gone out of state. And as a matter of for this week, it happened very quickly over just a span of 2 days. And it was very public, all occurring over Twitter. And so when the governor left the state, he was actually going down to Texas to join other Republican governors for that border visit. And once he left the state, the lieutenant governor tweeted out that she, quote, fixed one of his executive orders previously putting in a vaccine a mandate or a anti-vaccine mandate in place for local and state agencies. She expanded that so that vaccine mandates were banned for schools and universities. She also banned certain testing for people looking to seek care with state agencies. And so this was something that within 8 minutes, the governor fired back, saying he was going to rescind the order once he came back to the state. He did that yesterday afternoon before he even made it back to Idaho. And this just brings a political battle into the conversation around how COVID needs to be treated and who patients and community members need to trust. And to put this into perspective, what's confusing, right, is the Republican governor and a Republican lieutenant governor, they were actually elected separately. The lieutenant governor a little further right on the conservative spectrum, and she's actually running to unseat the governor here next year. And so bringing this political battle to the forefront over people's health in Iowa is starting to really concern doctors.
In the meantime, I'm guessing the governor may only plan some in-state trips in the future. Now, this confusion is frustrating doctors. How do these policy changes affect patients and community members who are trying to protect themselves from COVID?
Right, Joe? One doctor I spoke with, the medical director here who sees pediatric patients and hundreds of thousands of adult patients, called this a political stunt. He said it was shameful because we're seeing, unlike the rest of the country where cases and hospitalizations are declining, that's just not the case here in Idaho right now. That 42% vaccination rate is the second lowest in the country. And even though ICU bed availability is rising, doctors say that's because deaths are happening. So the only reason these ICU beds are opening up is because those COVID patients are dying. So the crisis here is still very severe as hospitals continue to ration care.
And Maura, this is all happening, as you mentioned, pediatric COVID hospitalizations also in the state reaching an all-time high this week. Just how bad is the situation on the ground there?
And that's what's really frustrating for doctors here. The pediatric cases have reached a record this week, 15 children in the hospital. Doctors noting that where schools have mask mandates in place, they're seeing less kids get sick. And so they want to see those mask wearing policies in place. But and the governor here has said that he does encourage mask wearing, but they're hesitant to issue these mandates. And as for unvaccinated teens, the doctors are pushing out that a teenager who is vaccinated is 10 times less likely to get sick or to get hospitalized than a vaccinated teen. And so when you have this conversation from the state's top leaders, it sows confusion and doubt over what these teenagers, these kids, even adults who are supposed to be protecting these kids who can't get vaccinated yet. It just creates this extra doubt and confusion in the community.
All right, Maura Barrett, thanks for your reporting.
With the country heading toward a debt limit catastrophe, Republican leaders appear to be easing their demands. Senator Mitch McConnell has offered a new deal to Democrats, giving them extra time. NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now. Hi, Garrett. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Good morning. Yeah, this deal is a tentative deal, and it's really only temporary, kicking the can until December, which means we could be facing down yet another crisis for people who get food stamps or Social Security payments, military pay. All of that could be in jeopardy just before Christmas.
After negotiating late into the night, there is still no deal on the debt limit.
We're making good progress. We're not there yet, but I hope we can come to an agreement tomorrow morning.
Earlier in the day, lawmakers reached a tentative agreement to extend the nation's borrowing limit into December. The move would avert a possible fiscal disaster for now. The potential political punt comes after days of building pressure and dire warnings of the consequences of congressional inaction, lapses in military pay, food stamps and tax credits, and stock markets tumbling.
It's a meteor headed to crash into our economy.
President Biden weighing in on Wednesday, urging Republicans to drop their threats to block a vote to lift the borrowing limit.
My Republican friends need to stop playing Russian roulette with the U.S. economy. If they don't want to do the job, just get out of the way.
Late Wednesday, that's exactly what they did, with Republican leader Mitch McConnell warning Democrats will have to deal with the new December deadline on their own.
They pulled the plug on the plan, Mitch folded, and now we've got time to go ahead and do Build Back Better.
The delay giving Democrats 2 months to focus on the Build Back Better legislation, a $3.5 trillion climate and social safety net bill, still the focus of Democratic infighting. The most conservative Democratic senator today demanding that price tag come down.
My number's been 1.5. I've been very clear. And I don't believe that we should turn our society into an entitlement society.
And its most progressive member firing back.
Does Senator Manchin really believe that seniors are not entitled to digest their food and that they're not entitled to hear and see properly? Is that really too much to ask in the richest country on earth?
Democrats hoping to pass the massive spending plan by the end of October, with President Biden in need of a boost now. A new poll showing his approval rating dropping to 38%, the lowest level of his presidency yet.
And with those poll numbers flagging, it was interesting to see the White House yesterday involving the CEOs who appeared side by side with President Biden, the AARP sending a letter, even 7 former secretaries of defense, all leaning on Congress to handle this debt limit issue now and not risk stumbling into some kind of further crisis by their inaction. Savannah?
All right, Garrett Haig, thank you for the latest, and thank you for working around the clock for us all here at NBC News over the past week. You might live right there in front of the Capitol building. I'm not sure. Garrett.
They just plug me into the wall and charge me overnight like a Roomba.
Okay, thanks, Garrett.
Now to the oil spill off the coast of California. As the cleanup effort intensifies, so does the confusion surrounding the timeline between when the spill started and when it was actually reported. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is in Huntington Bay with the very latest. Miguel, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. So we know the massive cleanup effort is focused on shore, but there's also big concern actually here in the water. There's thousands of feet of this yellow boom surrounding this area trying to capture and contain the oil. And officials are also trying to make sure they prevent a disaster like this from ever happening again.
This morning, the U.S. Coast Guard now classifying this oil spill as a major marine casualty, releasing these first images of the punctured pipeline, saying the NTSB will join the investigation. It comes amid confusion around the hours leading up to the disaster. Initial reports now suggest the pipeline may have been leaking for almost 12 hours before it was manually shut off. On Friday, the Coast Guard notified the state's emergency response team about an unknown sheen in the water at 6:13 p.m. According to preliminary findings found in federal documents obtained by NBC News, that's 8 hours before Amplify Energy's low-pressure alarm indicated a possible pipeline failure. Those documents show the company shut down the line at 6:01 a.m. Saturday, though the company now says it was not aware of oil in the water for another 2 hours and is working with regulators to determine what happened.
If we were aware of something on Friday night, I promised you we would have immediately stopped all operations and moved forward.
Operating in federal waters off Southern California's coast, the rig at the center of the spill has an oil pipeline that runs about 15 miles back to shore. That pipeline and this rig are more than 40 years old.
Investigators still aren't sure what caused the 4,000-foot section of the pipeline to be dragged across the ocean floor, displacing the pipe by over 100 feet and creating a 13-inch crack as oil spewed.
The fact that the pipeline appears to have been dragged leads me to conclude that it probably was caught on the ship's anchor.
One major focus now turning to a bottleneck at the nearby port of Long Beach. This map shows dozens of cargo ships with their massive 30-ton anchors currently sitting near the busted pipeline. But the Coast Guard also tells NBC News authorities are reviewing the pipe's integrity, corrosion, and potential pressure problems. Now hundreds of personnel on the ground and in the air are working to clean up the oil, hoping to slow the damage that's already been done.
So today, the focus out here on the ocean remains the cleanup, while also on shore, authorities are turning to GPS satellite coordinates to determine exactly what major cargo ships were in the area around the time of the rupture. Investigators say sorting through that could take them a few more days. Joe and Savannah, back to you guys.
All right, Miguel, thank you.
Now let's get a check on your morning news now. Weather again.
Bill Cairns is back with us. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Where's autumn? Where's fall? Have you guys seen fall anywhere?
Bill Cairns is back and ready to go.
Drink a pumpkin spice latte and pretend.
Yes, I don't want to be sweating when I'm having my pumpkin spice latte. So, yeah, that's the deal right now in the middle of the country. It continues to be very warm. There's no sign of autumn whatsoever from the Dakotas all the way down through Texas. And it's going to be very warm today, near record highs in a few cases. These temperatures are ranging about 10 to 20 degrees warmer than they should be, from Bismarck all the way down to Dallas. Even Cleveland today is about 14 degrees warmer than it should be. I mean, we forget that, when you get to start to get to the middle of October, we start to talk about frost and freezes. And I haven't even mentioned that word yet, really, for anywhere. So tomorrow will be one of the hottest middle to October days that you'll see. Dallas, 95, close to record highs. And you just get the picture. As we said, there's no signs of autumn out there. And as we head towards next week, some of that warm air will begin to shift a little bit to the east. It's been kind of cloudy and cooler in the northeast. Things will warm up a little bit as we head through this weekend. So speaking of the weekend forecast, that rain has been relentless in Alabama and Georgia. Today and tomorrow, it shifts towards more Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. We are getting some much needed rain in the areas of the Rockies and also the mountains of California, so we'll take that. Then on Saturday, apologies to my friends on the Outer Banks all the way through Norfolk, back into areas of southern New Jersey. Saturday will be kind of gloomy and on and off periods of rain. That will include Richmond to D.C. And then on Sunday, that rainy weather kind of lingers right along the mid-Atlantic coast. Some of it may be up around Long Island in the New York City area. So if you want a dry weekend, and you deserve it after the wet week you've had, Alabama through Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, it looks like a beautiful end to your weekend. And speaking of next week, we didn't have a lot of significant weather events this week. Next week we will. We're expecting a pretty big storm in the west. Temperatures are cold enough. I think we're going to get our first significant snowstorm in the Rockies. All the skiers are like, oh yeah, bring it on. Here we go. Jackson Hole through areas of southern Montana. We'll talk more about that next week, of course. But, we haven't mentioned much about snow in the West, and it's that time of year.
All right. Exciting.
I know. I went to Boulder for school, and it used to always snow before Halloween, which always surprised me.
That's right.
But it was a thing. All right. Thanks, Bill.
Coming up, an American survivor of the most deadly terrorist attack in modern French history is speaking out.
Yeah, Helen Wilson was at the Bataclan shooting. Her harrowing story next. Welcome back, and we have some breaking news for you.
Pfizer has applied for emergency use authorization of its COVID vaccine for kids between 5 and 11. This is the first company to apply for authorization for younger kids. Recent trials show the Pfizer vaccine is effective in preventing severe cases of COVID among kids. Children in the trial were given a smaller dose of the vaccine than adults. Right now, it's unclear when the FDA will take up Pfizer's application.
Now, survivors of the 2015 Bataclan terror attack in Paris testified in court yesterday, with some giving harrowing accounts of the suicide bombings and shootings that led to the death of 130 people. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobaya spoke exclusively with one of the survivors, and she joins us now. Hi, Kelly. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Savannah. Yes, we spoke to Helen Wilson, an American who has lived in Paris for many years. She is one of hundreds of witnesses testifying in this trial, the biggest criminal trial in French history. And as she took the stand yesterday, she talked about one of the gunmen and what she heard that night. She said that he said, "This is for our brothers in Syria," as he opened fire.
It was Europe's worst terrorist attack in November of 2015. American Helen Wilson was in the Bataclan Theater with her friend Nick Alexander when police say 3 gunmen stormed in shooting. Nick died in the theater. In her testimony late Wednesday, Helen said she felt him go cold. An hour and a half after the rampage started, she managed to escape.
I wasn't going to let him go. I wasn't about to leave him there on his own. I didn't even know until recently where Nick's injuries were. I just held him because that's what I needed to do. And that's what I still need to do.
The attacks at the theater, sidewalk cafes, and the National Stadium left 131 dead and more than 400 injured. The main defendant, French national Salah Abdeslam, described himself as a soldier for ISIS on the trial's opening day last month. Last week, telling the court if Muslims were killed in the attack, it was an accident because they only wanted to kill non-believers. How are you today, physically?
Physically, I'm okay, but everything is in my brain.
French-American Mohammed Amgour was working security at the National Stadium when the two ISIS bombers struck. 5 bolts, intentional shrapnel from a bomb, were embedded in his left side. He told me he testified in part to tell the defendants their view of Islam is wrong.
I don't believe we will go to paradise on hurting people, on killing people.
Abdeslam is scheduled to take the stand next spring. What do you want to hear from him?
I just want him to acknowledge that he's sorry that he hurt so many people that didn't deserve it. I doubt if I'll get that.
But is it part of history for you? Is this closure?
I don't know that we ever truly get closure from a lot of things. I think that things modify, but that they always stay with us.
Witness testimony continues today, and because there are so many witnesses, each only gets about 15 minutes in court on the stand to tell their story of really a night that changed all of their lives. Savannah, this is a very long trial. It's set to last until late May of next year. We may have a verdict by the end of May, and the key defendant, Salah Abdeslam, as I mentioned, is expected to take the stand sometime, possibly next April. Savannah.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. Now let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Ali Arouzi is back with us from Tehran. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, guys. As tensions remain high between China and Taiwan, a group of French senators visited the island and met with its president, much to the anger of China, who tried to scupper the trip before the senators' departure, saying it would undermine Chinese-French relations. China claims self-rule Taiwan as its own territory and opposes any international engagement with the island. A volcano on the Spanish island of La Palma is still spewing. Orange flecks of lava light up the night sky while a glowing river of lava winds its way down the volcano's slope. The eruption has already completely consumed about 450 houses, forced the evacuation of over 6,000 residents, and destroyed farmland and infrastructure. And finally, a climate activist stormed the runway models were walking down during the last event of Paris Fashion Week after sneaking into the event. Holding up a big banner reading "Overconsumption equals extinction," she walked down the entire length of the catwalk, even posing for a few seconds in front of cameras before security guards whisked her off stage. And those are your headlines, guys.
All right. Thank you, Ali.
Dramatic pictures there. Thank you.
Coming up, the coronavirus has orphaned tens of thousands of children.
And a new study reveals that Black and brown kids are experiencing this devastating loss at higher rates. This heartbreaking story is up next. Welcome back. Kids can once again take part in one of the top experiences at Disney's parks, but it comes with a little catch. Indoor meet and greets between Disney characters and guests will return this November, but autographs and hugs will not be allowed just yet. Instead, fans will only be allowed to take photos with their favorite costume characters with a socially distant space between them. The indoor visits had been postponed, of course, since the pandemic started, but their return signals another step in the right direction for fans of the parks, fans which include Joe and I. And also, you know, what is the best part about Disneyland or World in November is the Christmas decorations go up.
Oh, they that early?
Yes.
I guess that makes sense.
Definitely.
All right. I hear you like Christmas. So.
Just a little.
All right. Thank you, Savannah. Yeah. Tonight will be the sixth night lawmakers in Anchorage, Alaska meet to discuss a controversial mandate to require masking in indoor public spaces. Now, some of the meetings have been hostility that healthcare workers say has been brewing for months and that they are experiencing firsthand. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from Anchorage with more. So, Ellison, what have you been seeing from these public testimonies that are happening this week, and do you expect to see the same thing tonight?
So the first couple of assembly meetings were very, very tense. Opponents of this indoor mask mandate that they're considering, some of them actually harassed the physicians who were testifying in favor of it, both inside the meeting and outside as those people were trying to leave. And some of them donned yellow Stars of David, comparing mask mandates to the Holocaust in just a disgusting display of anti-Semitism. But it has also brought out since then some positivity in the community. We spoke to one hospital who said that they have seen for the first time in a while people put signs outside of the hospital thanking healthcare workers for what they're doing, signs that say healthcare workers are heroes. So since those early meetings, things, while still tense, while there are still strong opinions, have not been as aggressive as those early meetings. Hopefully that continues into the meetings tonight. But this is an incredibly controversial mandate in this city, and it has really brought out some very loud voices. And unfortunately, initially, those loud voices were people that turned to aggression and behaviors that really have no place in any sort of public space. Joe?
I mean, and Ellison, I know you spoke to several nurses about the harassment they're facing at work. They've even had interviews canceled, you have, because people said they'd gotten so much online harassment. What else did some of these nurses tell you?
Yeah, I mean, we started to try to get interviews coming out here a good week ago, and some hospitals told us, look, the physicians, the nurses we're reaching out to who normally would say yes because of what happened at those assembly meetings, they say that they're getting tons of online harassment, and they just don't feel comfortable having their names and their faces out there. We spoke to one woman who is a nurse. She's currently on maternity leave, but she says that for months now, they have not only been experiencing the difficulties of dealing with COVID-19 and waves and the current surge now of COVID cases, but hostility that just kind of keeps building, and things are really hard for them. Listen.
I got assaulted when I swabbed somebody for COVID who was literally on the verge of dying from COVID. She didn't believe she had it, and she struck me and another nurse after we swabbed her. You know, we get cussed at and yelled at and obscene gestures, and we frankly don't have enough security to keep everybody safe.
And in addition to being assaulted as she was trying to administer a COVID test, that nurse told us right before she went on maternity leave when she was 9 months pregnant, she was assaulted again by another person, and they had to put a cart between her and that person to just protect herself. She said she has been cursed at and obscene gestures sent her way after telling patients waiting in the ER room that they need to wear a mask so that other patients are also protected. Joe?
Their jobs are hard enough as it is. It's just so hard to believe they're going through this. This is all happening while the state is struggling to bring COVID cases down, get supplies to fight severe infections. You spoke to a nurse who has a message for patients. What did she say?
Yeah, she is an ICU nurse, and she said that she has been dealing a lot with people calling after reading conspiracy theories online, treatments that are not approved or based in any sort of scientific evidence, and then getting really angry when she tells them that's not something they can give their loved one. She said that her hospital actually gave them a piece of paper explaining how they should handle hostile callers, something she'd never gotten prior to the pandemic. She wants people to remember they are just doing their jobs. They are people too. They care about their patients, and everybody just needs to take a breath. Listen.
I wish that they would find it in themselves to understand where we're coming from. You know, we as healthcare professionals would never do anything we thought would not help their loved one, anyone. We're here to help no matter your situation.
And the Anchorage Assembly is having, as you said, their 6th meeting tonight to discuss that indoor mask mandate. Joe?
Hard to believe nurses have to try to reassure people that they're there to help people get better. That's the situation we're in some places. All right, Ellison Barber, thank you for your reporting. Appreciate it.
Now, of all the tragic statistics we've seen on COVID in the past year and a half, here is a particularly difficult one to hear. More than 140,000 children in the U.S. have lost a parent or caregiver to the virus. That's according to a new study published in the Pediatrics Journal. It's a devastating consequence of the pandemic, and as one expert says, it will be a problem that lasts for many years. NBC News health and medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now to help us understand this study. Erica, good morning to you. I mean, we've talked so many numbers throughout the course of this virus, number of cases, number of hospitalizations. This number goes beyond all that. Tell us what you learned from this heartbreaking research.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Yeah, this is a tough one. Let's take a look at the numbers. This new study from the CDC finds that 1 out of every 515 children in this country has lost a parent or primary caregiver to COVID-19. And just as you said, that's more than 140,000 kids who've now lost that person who had nurtured them, who fed them, who loved them and cared for them. Shockingly, Savannah, this actually might be an underestimate. That's because the study only looked at data through the end of June of this year. That's right when the super contagious Delta variant was just beginning to take hold and cases were beginning to really rise once again. Savannah.
And now we know COVID has had a bigger impact on communities of color. And unfortunately, this situation is no different. These numbers follow that trend. I know. What kind of racial disparities are you seeing with children who have lost parents to the virus?
Yeah, it sure does. So 1 out of every 753 white children has been affected this way. But when you look at the racial breakdowns of racial and ethnic minority groups, it's much different. 1 out of 412 Hispanic children, 1 out of 310 Black children, and 1 out of every 168 American Indian or Native Alaskan child has lost a parent or a caregiver to COVID-19. Now, that's a lot of numbers. So for context, 60% of the U.S. population is white, but the burden essentially flips when you're talking about children who have lost a parent. 65% of those children are in racial and ethnic minority groups. Savannah.
Now, Erica, of course, it's just heartbreaking to think about a child losing a parent in general. And for some of these kids, I mean, they're becoming an orphan because of this. They're losing both parents, or maybe they'd already lost a parent. What do we know about what the future holds for them?
Well, they're going to need help, and they're going to need a lot of it. These children are at risk for multiple health problems, loss of health care, food insecurity, homelessness. So I think that this is going to be really a focus of not only research, but, immediate action in the weeks and months and even years to come. Savannah.
All right. Erica Edwards, thank you so much for walking us through these numbers, as heartbreaking as they are. And there is lots more still to come.
You're watching Morning News Now. President Biden's approval rating among Americans has slipped to an all-time low as he deals with several crises here on the home front.
Yeah, the newest numbers from Quinnipiac University show the president's approval on a downward trend. Now, if we've got new approval numbers, we've got Steve Kornacki joining us at the big board to break it down. Steve, good morning. So tell us what these new numbers show. How low is it?
Yeah, good morning to you. Well, let's try to put this in context here. So, 38 in this new Quinnipiac poll. This is the lowest number we've seen in an individual poll for Biden. But one thing to try to put this in some context here, there's always a bunch of different polls that are out there that are kind of being taken together. So let's average together. Let's take a look at the poll average of all of the polls that are out right now, basically in the last week, 10 days or so when it comes to Biden. And here you go. It's actually, the number ticks up a little higher. There is a slight difference here in terms of this is registered voters versus all adults versus registered voters. But you see the average is a little bit higher for Biden, but still, even on average, he's underwater. He's a higher disapproval than approval. And now if we take this a step further, let's compare Biden at this point in his polling average, October, his first year, to his recent predecessors. How does this number, this average, stack up to them? So take a look first. This was Donald Trump. This was the October 7th, that should say, October 2017, 39% approval rating Trump had. Now go back 8 years earlier, Barack Obama, autumn of his first year, Obama was actually 52-41. Wow. Now, that looks, Obama was on a pretty steady downward trajectory. You remember it ended in a midterm carnage for the Democrats a year later. But again, Biden's number right now falls between where Obama and Trump was. This is the long-term trajectory since Biden became president. You see, it has, it's the range is not that big, but it has gone in a downward direction. And the other way we can look at this, the other question that's asked in this Quinnipiac poll, asked in a lot of polling, is the generic congressional ballot. Next year, 2022, midterm election, which party will you support, Democrats, Republicans? Right now, on average, the Democrats with a lead of about 2.5 points. We'll see what that translates into. But again, put this in perspective. What did the generic ballot look like? At this point, In Donald Trump's presidency, the Democrats were up 8. We remember the Democrats took back the House in 2018. And then you go back again, 2009. At this point in Obama's presidency, it looks fairly similar. The Democrats were up a little bit more than 2 points. And, of course, 2010 did bring that midterm wipeout for the Democrats. So that's why the polls like this are worrying signs for the Biden administration. The midterms are a long way off, but he's getting into that territory that can be very dicey.
And one of the things that I think stands out from it was his approval on immigration and the economy dipping below 40% as well, which are obviously issues that are important to people, especially the economy.
Absolutely, yep.
All right, Steve.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. Good to have you here.
All right, and we'll be back with more. Oh, no, we're going to do our CBC Money Minute. Apologies. I can't read the teleprompter today. The biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
And there she is. Silvana now is with us. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Yep, I'm here. All right, moments ago, we got a new snapshot of the state of the economy and the labor market. Jobless claims coming in better than expected at 326,000, lower than the 345,000 expected. General Motors aims to double its annual sales by the end of the decade as it shifts to an all-electric future. The automaker is vowing to be the market leader in electric vehicles. It currently only has about 9% of the U.S. market behind Tesla, which controls more than 60%. GM also unveiling Ultra Cruise, a new suite of advanced driver assist tools for its premium models with the future goal of hands-free driving in nearly all situations. Microsoft and Adidas are teaming up to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Xbox with the first official Xbox sneakers. They're inspired by the original 2001 console with green and black colors and the original Xbox logo. This appears to be a limited edition sneaker that Microsoft will use for giveaways, but there will also be a separate Xbox-inspired sneaker available for purchase later this year. Back to you.
All right, well, that's pretty cool, especially for Xbox fans. Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
Hollywood is at the bargaining table this morning. Workers in one union say they're being overworked and underpaid. If change isn't made, they're ready to go on strike.
Yeah, and that could have a major impact on some of your favorite shows. NBC News reporter Aisa Garcia-Hodges joins us now to help sort it all out. Good morning. So these workers are from the International Association of Theatrical Stage Employees Union. What are in roles? What do they represent? They're camera operators, costume makers, hair and makeup artists. So tell us, is that right? And if a strike does happen, what would that impact look like?
Fairly substantial. To be quite frank, this is a large portion of the people who are working on crews for television shows and films. So, IATSE represents hair and makeup artists, as you said, costume designers. A lot of these people are very skilled laborers. So it's not, so if they do decide to go on strike, it would have a very substantial impact because of the fact that these are workers. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, these are workers who are very skilled, and it's a very, very specialized set of skills that they are. So it'd be difficult to replace them.
So, Aisa, you spoke to some of the roughly 60,000 workers in the union. What issues are most concerning to them?
Very, very basic things, wanting to be able to take a lunch break, to be able to, if they need to use the restroom. They are working in excess of 12 hours, in some cases 19, 24-hour days, and having very little downtime in between. So they're looking for the ability to take breaks when they need to, which is something they should legally be able to do, be able to have rest in between shifts, and then also pay. Some of the lowest paid workers are making $16 an hour. And considering the industry that makes up Hollywood, they obviously have a very, very legitimate grievance that, they should be making more to support a lifestyle in some of the most expensive cities in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that the workers also told you that the boom in streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus is actually making things harder for them. This obviously is impacting this industry as a whole. How does this work for them? How does it affect them?
So essentially, it's created more work, but because it's a skill set that is so limited and very unique in some cases and specialized, it's not necessarily creating more jobs so much as more work for the finite set of workers who can do this. And part of the problem is that when streaming, kind of with the advent of streaming, they were given a discounted rate, right? So in order to kind of help get this burgeoning industry or streaming off the ground, they were given a rate at which workers could be hired for less. And so now workers are saying, okay, this is great, but this trial period should have ended, and clearly streaming is viable. It's bringing in millions for these platforms, and we aren't seeing, to be discounted for our labor is kind of one of the people said it's discounting our lives.
All right, Aisa Garcia-Hodges, really interesting stuff here. Thank you so much for your reporting this morning.
Halloween may still be more than 3 weeks away, but supply chain shortages are already causing a big scare for retailers and customers ahead of the holiday.
NBC News correspondent Kathy Park joins us now with more on the potential impact this could have. Kathy, what can you tell us?
Hey guys, good morning to you. As you know, there were a lot of COVID cancellations last year, so more Americans plan on celebrating Halloween this year, and you can bet those sales are going to soar, and that's certainly a treat for retailers. However, behind the scenes, they are dealing with a lot of challenges getting these costumes and decorations into the stores.
With Halloween closing in, a nightmare for retailers is becoming a reality.
It's been a very difficult year to get costumes and decorations in store, in stock.
Demand is picking up at this Chicago costume shop, but there's a major slowdown getting merchandise on the shelves. From congested ports to truck driver shortages, the ongoing supply chain issues mean products are still stuck in transit.
We're still waiting on about 25 or 30% of the merchandise to come in that we've previously ordered, and some of it probably won't even ever come in before the holiday.
They are not alone. Spirit Halloween operates roughly 1,400 pop-up locations across the country, and they're also haunted by shipping delays.
When did you realize this was going to be an issue?
It really all showed up in April when we were starting our shipping. All of a sudden, the supply of containers dried up.
If I were a customer walking into your store, would you notice anything different?
As a customer, you might notice some bald spots.
With COVID canceling many festivities last Halloween, Americans plan to go big this year, expected to spend a record $10 billion on costumes, decorations, and more.
This year, hopefully I find, what I'm looking for, but who knows?
New costumes this year, like tracksuits inspired by the Netflix hit Squid Game, are selling out fast and may be harder to get closer to Halloween.
The Squid Game stuff has been really every other person is asking for it.
Your soul will be mine.
To avoid the scare of not finding that perfect costume,
try and get to the store early.
Like now.
Like now would be great.
And some retailers say don't be spooked by higher price tags as they try to make up for the cost of doing business. That goes for pumpkins, too. They're facing a shortage in some parts of the country because of extreme weather.
They're hard to find and they're extremely expensive.
Prepare for sticker shock with Halloween making a big comeback.
So as you heard, there are a lot of challenges this Halloween season. So a couple things to keep in mind. You do want to shop early, especially if you have a specific costume in mind. Also consider getting crafty. Maybe you want to make your Halloween costume this year. And if you are in the store and you are set on getting a specific costume and it's not around, keep an open mind. So, Joe, I'm thinking, where's Waldo for you?
Oh.
And then Savannah, how about Wonder Woman?
Oh, love
Right?
it. Kathy, I was going to ask, is the shortage already? You're not in costume.
Well, yeah, well, you know what? I'm at Halloween Adventure here in East Village. I do have a costume. The Today Show, they pointed out that I didn't know my Star Wars, so I found this. I think this will be perfect for me.
That's how you should have done your intro.
And it's easy.
Yeah. And you won't need a mask.
And it's good for COVID, right?
Right.
It's a mask.
Exactly.
I'm masked up. I don't have to deal with it,
Might be hard
Exactly.
to breathe in for a long time, but it's okay.
Looks kind of comfy.
No, they're vents.
Oh, my goodness. You're done. Done. All right.
They thought of
Shortage won't
everything.
keep you down. All right.
Kathy Park, thank you. Coming up, the iconic glaciers at the Swiss Alps are melting at record speed.
Yeah, so can scientists figure out a way to stop climate change from breaking the ice? We'll show you how they're trying. That's up next.
The famous snow-capped peaks of the Alps are a bucket list destination for many adventurers.
Yeah, but climate change could leave the European mountain range looking very different in the future. NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons reports from one of Switzerland's biggest glaciers.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. I'm standing up high in the Alps in front of the Rhone Glacier. It is beautiful, isn't it? But it is also under threat from climate change because landlocked Switzerland is warming at twice the global rate. You can actually see parts of the glacier breaking off into the water there. But it's not just that. If you look at these rocks, you can see that they are smoothed out with ridges. That tells us that the glacier was actually here, but not just here, down there where that waterfall is and on those smoothed out rocks behind me there. And even at one time, 150 years ago, right down there into the valley. Across Europe's world-famous mountain range, glaciers are in retreat. 500 gone forever. Like the Rhone, an 11,000-year-old avalanche of ice now shrinking dramatically. In the past 10 years, 20% of the Alps' so-called eternal ice has been washed away. These 150-year-old hotels were built at what was then the foot of the Rhone Glacier. Now the Rhone is reachable only on steep, winding alpine roads. Today, scientist Matthias Hutt leads a team who monitor the relentless retreat, almost a mile in 120 years.
So this was about 2005, I would say. The glacier still filled up this whole region we see here.
The water here is where this glacier was.
Yes, exactly.
He first saw the Rhone Glacier aged 11.
It's so different than it used to be 30 years ago.
You can see it with your own eyes in your own lifetime.
Exactly, you can see it, and it's much more obvious than seeing just a graph with rising temperatures.
Desperate to save tourism and the glaciers, locals have spread UV-resistant white blankets to reflect the sun, slowing the thaw by up to 50%, protecting these beautiful ice caves against all the odds. Look, you can see it. And you can hear it melting. But to see the most dramatic example, local guide Andrew takes me on a long trek further up.
My grandfather, he was mountain guide. 100 years ago, the glacier came down to this valley.
Wow. He saw that?
20 years ago. There was no lake.
With the glacier gone, the only way to cross is the Trift Bridge. This changing environment will impact our lives. The world's glaciers store almost 3/4 of our fresh water. If you're brave enough to look down, you realize how deep the glacier was. It's all gone?
All gone.
Complete transformation.
Now it's so fast.
But the Swiss are fighting back and turning adversity into opportunity. This is the Oberaar Dam, 7,550 feet up in the Alps. It's also the climate change equivalent of taking lemons and making lemonade. That melting glacier is putting water into this lake from which they're creating renewable energy. To see it up close, you have to go a mile under the mountain. So these are glaciers, and then we're here underneath the lake.
That's right.
Our tour of one of Switzerland's many hydropower plants.
Okay, come in.
Wow. Here. Look at this. Ends in the heart of the operation, the massive turbine room. How much of Switzerland's energy comes from power stations like this?
60%.
From
water.
Water. Water, much of which comes from glaciers melted by our warming climate. It's too late to save many of these majestic oceans of ice, but not too late to save our planet. And you know, Savannah and Joe, we can't pretend that it's going to be easy. That mountain guide that you saw in my report there, Andrew, is actually opposed to a new dam being built where the Trift Bridge is because he says that it will ruin the landscape. And It may be too late to stop glaciers like this one disappearing, but if we can slow climate change, we can slow down the melting ice, particularly in the Arctic, and slow down rising sea levels, because that could cause a real catastrophe. Savannah, Joe?
Absolutely. Wow, Keir, amazing piece. Thank you so much.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.